President Park Geun-hye names a former Supreme Court justice as her new prime minister and sacks the spy chief and her national security advisor to win back a public trust lost after the April ferry disaster. Campaigning for the June 4th local elections begins in Korea with the word safety dominating the campaign scene. And the Thai military says it's taken control of the country in a coup, saying rival factions have failed to reach an agreement.
Hello and welcome to Primetime News. I'm Sean Lim.
Happy Thursday, everyone. I am Kang Tae-ri in Seoul. Let's begin with the development on the Korean Peninsula. Tonight, North Korea fired multiple shells in the direction of a South Korean patrol ship in the West Sea at around 6 p.m. on this Thursday.
Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said the firing occurred about 14 kilometers southwest off Yeonpyeong-do Island, reaching below the northern limit line, the de facto maritime border between the two Koreas. The patrol ship was not hit, but the South Korean Navy did fire back in retaliation and are keeping close watch over possible further provocations. As a precaution, nearly 800 residents of Yeonpyeong-do were evacuated to a nearby shelter. This follows Tuesday's incident when 3 North Korean patrol boats crossed the maritime border, only to be driven back by warning shots from the south. Well, it's been more than 3 weeks since Prime Minister Chung Hong-won tendered his resignation over the government's lax response to the Sewol-ho ferry disaster, and now the nation has a new nominee.
That's right. President Park Geun-hye named An Dae-hee, a former Supreme Court justice, to the post. An's nomination will be confirmed after a parliamentary hearing. Choi Yoo-sun reports.
President Park Geun-hye has tapped An Dae-hee, a former Supreme Court justice, as the new prime minister. Presidential office spokesperson Min Kyung-wook on Thursday said An's principles and integrity in the judicial community were a key reason for his appointment.
The nominee expected to successfully carry out reforms within the public sector and the government, and to push forward with the government's campaign to root out corruption in our society.
An has a track record of investigating cases of corruption in politics on both sides of the aisle. He made a name for himself in 2003 after looking into allegations that the then-opposition Conservative Party had amassed illegal election funds, and in the same year looked into corruption charges against the aides of then-Liberal President Roh Moo-hyun. The nominee also spearheaded the ruling Saenuri Party's political reforms ahead of the 2012 presidential election. As part of President Park's recent promise of sweeping reforms, she also accepted the resignations of her top presidential security advisor Kim Jang-soo and National Intelligence Service Chief Nam Jae-jun. Earlier on Thursday, President Park called on her senior secretaries to clearly distinguish the roles of the National Security Council and the soon-to-be-established Safety Ministry. The president said the NSC should respond to anything that threatens national security, such as a war or a terror threat, while the Safety Ministry should manage public safety and natural and man-made disasters. President Park then urged her officials to make sure that the more than a dozen people still missing from the Sewol-ho ferry accident are found. She then reiterated her commitment to transforming Korea into a safer place to ensure that the more than 300 victims of the ferry tragedy did not die in vain. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
So how does the new prime minister nominee fit into today's political landscape?
Our Park Ji-won gets one view on how the nomination is expected to accelerate the president's cleanup campaign.
Experts believe the nomination of the former Supreme Court Judge An Dae-hee as the nation's next prime minister represents the Park Geun-hye administration's push for government reforms.
The nomination can be interpreted as the president's strong will towards political and governmental reform in the midst of high public demand for reforms in the area of government bureaucrats and government organization.
Yoon said the nominee's upstanding career may have been one of the factors behind his nomination.
An was a prosecutor before becoming a Supreme Court judge, and he has led an upright career with an image of integrity and reform-mindedness.
He added the nomination also signals a much-anticipated shakeup in President Park's cabinet.
Given An's nomination and the government's will for reforms, it seems highly likely that President Park will choose non-bureaucratic politicians and experts outside governmental organizations as heads of ministries.
Yoon's predictions about the upcoming cabinet reshuffle comes as public doubt grows high concerning governmental organizations and bureaucrats over their failed handling of the ferry disaster. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Campaigning for the June 4th local elections has finally begun here in Korea, but given the sense of grief and sorrow that remains over last month's ferry disaster, the political battles will be noticeably toned down from years past. Kim Myung-gil shows us the measured scenes from the first day of campaigning.
Incumbent Seoul Mayor Park Geun-hye of the main opposition party started his campaign by greeting commuters at one of the capital's busiest subway stations in Gangnam on Thursday.
Koreans, especially Seoul citizens, start their hard life from the morning, cramming into subway trains. There is a problem with the quality of people's lives.
The ruling Saenuri Party's Chung Mong-jun, who is challenging Mayor Park, spent part of his first day campaigning at Yeongcheon Traditional Market, trying to connect with the working class.
This market is located in the center of Seoul, with convenient transportation nearby. I will work with local district members to make sure this market is cleaner and more attractive.
Candidates will be making their pledges known in their provinces and cities over the next couple of weeks. Many of them will center around safety as candidates seek to win support from a population disappointed and frustrated with the government's poor handling of the Seoul ferry disaster. The ruling Saenuri Party is adopting an apologetic approach. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy is expected to target the government, tapping into the perceived lack in competence in safety management. In the latest polls, the ruling party is lagging behind the main opposition party in key regions such as Seoul and the western port city of Incheon. Ruling party candidates have seen their support crumble in the wake of the ferry accident. Kim Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Turning to regional relations, Chinese President Xi Jinping is calling on neighboring countries to build a security framework aimed at countering Washington's influence in the region. But as our Kim Yeon-bin reports, with China mired in territorial disputes with many of the countries it's seeking to partner up with, the prospects for the Chinese leader getting his way don't look too good.
President Xi Jinping at an international security summit in Shanghai on Wednesday said that the problems facing Asia today should be handled by the nations within Asia.
Asia countries should all cooperate to resolve security issues in the region.
It was a not-so-veiled reference to the U.S. as it seeks to increase its influence in Asia.
A third party aimed at enhancing military alliances in the region does not serve our interests.
Xi made the statements at the 4th Conference on Interaction and Confidence-Building Measures in Asia, a group of more than 20 mostly Asian nations. Xi's vision for a new Asian security concept has a supporter in Russia, which launched joint naval exercises near the disputed East China Sea islands this week. Russian President Vladimir Putin has already backed the idea, but it may be hard to see it through, as nations will be reticent to harm relations with Washington. Many of them are also mired in territorial disputes with China. Relations between Beijing and Washington have been sour in recent months over accusations of cyber attacks, newly established air defense zones, and territorial disputes in the South China Sea. Kim Yeon-bin, Arirang News.
Curry's comments came in response to
your gateway to the day's biggest stories in Korea and around the world. Breaking news, the hottest interviews, and a whole lot more. Join Arirang Sean Lim and Kang Chae-ri from the heart of Seoul.
Begins now.
Primetime news, weeknights, live at 10 on Arirang TV.
Korea may be regarded as an IT powerhouse globally, but the OECD says the country needs to work on better channeling its research and development to create real corporate results. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
The K-Tech Global R&D Forum, supervised by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy, was a chance to examine the current state of Korea's industrial technology and R&D policies from a global perspective. A senior economist from the OECD, Alistair Nolan, released the agency's latest report on the matter. He says Korea has one of the highest levels of university patenting for technology, following Israel and Estonia. But Nolan said the patents are not frequently used by corporations, highlighting a lack of interaction between the business and academic fields.
Time and again, when we talked with industry representatives, the lack of awareness of IP, intellectual property, was considered a problem. They have a mindset which is conditioned, which is shaped by the incentives that they face, because they are rewarded and their universities are rewarded according to the rate of academic citations and patents, but they're not rewarded in terms of or because of their success in commercialization outcomes.
A handful of model policies from the world's leading academic institutions were presented in response. Electrical engineering professor Kim Jong-min of Oxford University says his institution seeks to own all of its intellectual property jointly with its owners so that it can be used by researchers and industry partners.
Some people say they may lose opportunity and money in the short period of time, but in the longer term, they will get more returns as a royalty.
Kim suggested that small and medium-sized companies have a great chance to succeed in the energy sector when collaborating with universities, since it depends on the basic sciences and the convergence of many different types of R&D. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Amid signs that the U.S. economy is picking up, the Federal Reserve is discussing how it will start to raise short-term interest rates, though that currently stands at near zero. The Fed, however, has made clear that the rates will stay low in coming months. Connie Lee has more.
U.S. Federal Reserve policymakers have begun paving the way for raising short-term interest rates after keeping them near zero for 6 years. The central bank's April meeting minutes revealed Wednesday confirmed the Fed is not ready to normalize monetary policy by starting to hike interest rates anytime soon. But policymakers did engage in prudent planning and looked at several approaches for such steps as a reverse easy monetary policy. Fed Chairwoman Janet Yellen reiterated earlier this month that interest rates would not rise until the U.S. economy was strong enough.
Interest rates are unlikely to begin rising until we are in a strong economic recovery. We eventually will start to raise interest rates. I'm assuming the economy will continue to recover, and at some point that will become appropriate.
As the U.S. economy strengthens, interest rates are expected to rise in the latter half of 2015. Since 2008, the Fed has kept rates at near 0% to help the economy recover from a severe recession. The April meeting minutes also suggest that the Fed will keep reducing its stimulus plan, as leaders say the U.S. economy is on a path of moderate growth. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics has once again been ranked among the 30 most valuable brands in the world.
The brand equity database BrandZ placed Samsung 29th in its top 100 most valuable global brands list, up one notch from last year, and valued them at $26 billion. Samsung was the only Korean company to make the list. Google overtook Apple to bounce back as the most valuable global brand with a value of $159 billion. And speaking of Samsung, it's been nearly 2 weeks since the chairman of Samsung Electronics, Park Geun-hye, was hospitalized after suffering a heart attack. But there hasn't been any news of his recovering consciousness.
Exactly, and this is, of course, raising questions about, what kind of challenges that Samsung may face without his leadership. And after all, the group's sales itself accounts for, a quarter of the country's GDP. And Park Geun-hye is joining us, of course, in our studio. So will Samsung take a hit without Lee Geun-hye at the helm?
Well, not according to some of the experts I've spoken to, and that's because of the system, the DNA that Samsung has already built in over the past 20 years. And that's what James Rooney from Advanced Capital Partners said on this show as well, right? And there's also the fact that Samsung Group is not micromanaged by Lee at this point. But in the long term, experts say Samsung might face challenges as Chairman Lee was the one who sets up the big picture and pushes through radical changes and gets it done fast. It took less than 2 years for Chairman Lee Geun-hye to transform all of the group when he was trying to catch up with Apple when Apple came out with the iPhone. But now there's a big question mark hovering over the head of heir apparent Lee Jae-yong, Chairman Lee's son, who will have to fill the shoes of his father.
I'm not quite sure if Jae-yong Lee, succeeds his role. He would be able to show that much of a leadership, which will, drive the entire entity to cope with the changes.
Some pundits also point to the fact that Jae-yong has no major accomplishments to speak of in the 10 years since he began taking part in management decisions. In fact, in 2000, Jae-yong was leading 14 internet venture companies as the largest shareholder of Samsung. Just 1 year later, all of them were bankrupt.
And there have been calls for improving the corporate governance of Samsung, especially when it comes to the ownership structure. How is that going to affect the new leadership?
Well, as you said, the family has near absolute control of the entire group while holding tiny stakes in 74 affiliates through a tangled cross-shareholding of companies. And shareholder activists obviously don't like this highly complicated web of cross-shareholding, saying it weakens the influence of outside shareholders.
There should be no cross-shareholdings between the non-financial sector and the financial sector. As you know, Samsung Life Insurance is the largest shareholder of Samsung Electronics. That chain must be broken.
And with Lee Geun-hye out of the picture, investors may speak out against this structure more actively. And can Junior Lee Jae-yong and the Samsung family maintain their group? The grip over the group is the question.
Yes, and a lot of spotlight on how the group is going to restructure itself. What do we know about the succession plan so far?
Well, the big picture of the plan is mostly drawn up, experts say, and many are predicting that the electronics and financial sector will be handed over to Lee's only son, Jae-yong, the chemical and hotel sectors to first daughter, Poo-jin, and the fashion and media sectors to second daughter, Seoyeon. But they add that nothing is for certain when it comes to which affiliate goes to whom, especially regarding the construction sector.
Okay, so we have much more to look forward to. Thank you so much, Jie.
Thank you for having me.
Thailand's military has announced a coup d'etat just days after it declared martial law across the kingdom in order to restore peace and order.
With more on this story, we go now to Paul Yee at the News Center. Paul, it appears the Thai army has backtracked on its promise to the people that this wasn't a coup. What triggered this sudden decision?
Well, the announcement came after negotiations broke down between the leaders of Thailand's rival political factions. Hundreds of soldiers surrounded the meeting place at Bangkok's Army Club and proceeded to detain Suthep Thaok Suban, the leader of the anti-government protests. Thailand's Army Chief General Prayut Chan-o-cha had summoned them for talks since yesterday in order to find a peaceful solution to the political crisis the country is facing. Shortly after, in a televised statement, General Prayut said that the military was seizing control of the government and suspending the constitution. He added that the military would return the country to stability and enact political reforms.
to reform the social structure economically, socially, and in other ways to create equality for everybody and for every side. The Peace-Maintaining Committee, which consisted of Army, Army Forces, Navy, and Air Forces, as well as the National Police, has to take control of power to administrate the country.
Military troops were deployed across the kingdom this past Tuesday after martial law was declared. The military has restricted the movement of pro- and anti-government protesters in the capital city while taking over media outlets that were backing the two sides. Thailand has been suffering months of growing civil unrest, which has left dozens dead and hundreds injured. Whether this latest coup will bring an end to the violence remains to be seen. And turning now to China, where a deadly attack in the northeastern region of Xinjiang has killed at least 31 people and injured 90 others. Officials say a series of explosions ripped through the city of Urumqi earlier Thursday in what is described as the deadliest act of violence in the region in years. According to state media, two unmarked vehicles broke through roadside fences and plowed into people in an open market before exploding. In a statement, Chinese President Xi Jinping demanded that the case be solved quickly and the terrorists be punished severely. He also called for a rapid mobilization of aid to assist the injured people and console the victims' families.
This violent terrorist incident once again shows that terrorists are fundamentally against humanity, society, and civilization. They should be condemned jointly by the Chinese people and the international community.
Chinese Ministry of Public Security called the attack on Urumqi a serious violent terrorist incident. In recent months, China has blamed a series of knife and bomb attacks on separatist militants from Xinjiang, home to the ethnic Muslim Uyghur minority. That wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome to Primetime Sports. I'm Stephen Chen. Now we start in the MLB, where South Korean pitcher Ryu Hyun-jin took the mound for the LA Dodgers for the second of a three-game series versus the New York Mets. Now, it was his first start since landing on the disabled list late last month with shoulder inflammation. And he didn't disappoint. In 6 innings of work, the southpaw gave up 2 runs on 9 hits with 9 strikeouts. Now, the Dodgers mustered enough run support for the 4-3 victory over the Mets, giving Ryu the win and improving his record to 4-2 with a 3.0 ERA. Now for football news, just 3 weeks ahead of the World Cup, Uruguay's top striker Luis Suarez was inflicted with a knee injury during training. The 27-year-old opted for keyhole surgery to repair his damaged meniscus and could be out for anywhere between 15 days to over a month or more, depending on its severity. Although his camp says he'll be ready on time, the injury will force Uruguay to make a tough decision when rosters are finalized on June 2nd. And moving on to track and field, American sprinter Justin Gatlin posted the 2 fastest 100-meter times of 2014 in 2 competitions in China. He first broke this year's mark in Shanghai, putting up a time of 9.92 seconds, all before breaking it 3 days later in Beijing, crossing the finish line at 9.87 seconds. With Jamaica's Usain Bolt recovering from a foot injury, Gatlin has so far taken the reins this season. And leaving all of that there, let's get to Thursday's top KBO matchup. The LG Twins faced off against the Kia Tigers. Now we go straight to the second inning. LG's on the board first. They make it 3-0 with a rally. Now we go on to the very next inning. The Twins tack on 2 more before Kia answers back with in the bottom with a run. But we fast forward to the 5th. LG's Oh Ji-hwan, he hits 2 of 3 runs in the inning. And a couple more runs later, LG goes on to win this one 12-6. And looking at the other games, we have Hanwha dismantling Nexon 16-3. Meanwhile, Samsung wins over Lotte 6-5. And finally, SK edges out NC in extra innings 3-2. Well, that's all I have for now. This has been Stephen Che. I'll see you back here later for more from the world of sports.
It is getting hotter by the day, and tomorrow late July-like conditions will be felt here on the peninsula.
And And we now go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center for more. Bo-kyung, how is Friday, my favorite day of the week, shaping up?
Guys, get ready for even hotter conditions as Seoul's daytime high will jump to 29 degrees. This is the highest of the season so far, and UV levels will also rise higher compared to today. Now, red areas indicate regions that will rise to the very high range, so don't forget to apply sunscreen or wear hats for extra protection from the sun. At the moment, the eastern coastal regions are seeing cloudy skies due to easterly winds. Now, tomorrow, average daytime highs around the nation will peak from between 23 to 30 degrees. Otherwise, showers are on the way from Sunday evening through Monday morning, so we'll be able to get a break from this unseasonably high temperature. On Friday, Seoul starts off the day at 15 degrees with a high of 29, while Daegu and Gwangju hit 30. Moving on to other places, Daejeon tops out at 28 degrees, while Jeju and Dokdo reach 25 and 16. That's all from me at this hour, and back to you guys.
And that's all for this edition of Primetime News. Thanks for watching.
And hope you can join us again tomorrow. Good night.